Chapter 31, Distractions. The first thing that makes Blue reconsider his enthusiasm is the sheer number of Geodude, Zubat, Sandshrew, Graveler, and other Pokémon flooding out of the hole in the mountain. The second is the cloud of spores that pour out after them, disguised and mingled with the dust of the collapsed earth. Blue watches as a Graveler pulls itself up into the sunlight and takes 2 stumbling steps forward, then collapses onto its face to reveal a back covered in visibly growing fungus. Goosebumps break out along his arms as a childhood fear returns, spawned by nights of staying up past his bedtime to secretly watch zombie movies. Until his parents died, waking to find his friends and family stumbling around with blank white eyes and fungal caps was his most recurring nightmare. Migrating Parasect colony, or maybe a rampage, started a stampede. Fire and flying Pokémon are top priority. He pulls his face mask on and unhooks Zephyr's ball, then hesitates as the wave of fleeing Pokémon approaches them. Hopefully they're too panicked to do anything but run, but if he summons a Pokémon in front of them, they might attack it. Steven and Janet, clear that cloud out. Everyone to the west of the opening, move north or south immediately. The voice comes from Ryback's radio, and the group skids to a halt as they realize within seconds of each other that they're in the danger zone. Leaf breaks southward first, and the rest follow her, keeping an eye out for the stampeding Pokémon that run or fly past them, oblivious to their doom. A trio of Sandshrew scurry toward them in an intersecting route, and Ryback unclips a ball and throws, summoning a Sandslash in a blink. "Keep going," he tells them as he stops behind his Pokémon. The trio doesn't even exchange a look, all 3 stepping beside him and summoning Maturin, Bulbasaur, and Spearow. The oncoming Sandshrew hesitate, then dive under the ground. They brace themselves for an attack, but after a few seconds the Pokémon pop out of the ground behind them and keep fleeing. They withdraw their Pokémon and continue southward until they reach one of the portable buildings and run behind it. "I had that handled," Ryback says. "If you want to help, you'll have to defer to those of us here. Understood?" Blue opens his mouth just as another voice speaks from the radio. "This is Janet. We're in position. If anyone's not clear, say so now." Ryback presses his radio button. "Ryback here, we're clear, over." "Hero, clear, over." "Natalie and Carmen, clear, over." "Stupid," she said to say something if you're not clear. The last of the Pokémon from the hole are dispersing past them, and Blue fights the urge to take out Pokéballs to grab some. It seems like such a waste to just let them run by, but they might have a chance to pick some up later, and it's not worth the risk of starting an unnecessary fight in such a volatile situation. Incoming whirlwind over. They watch as the cloud of dust and spores gets caught in a slowly building cyclone and shift in a slow spiral as it blows westward. It sails over the fleeing Pokémon in its path before dispersing into the open air past the edge of the mountain. Blue watches the heavier Pokémon that don't get swept up collapse, skin covered in spores. With the obscuration out of the way, they can see the dozens of Crimson Paras and Parasect crawling over the mountain in outward waves, emitting a new fog of spores as they go. The voice of the ace on the radio is calm. Parasect colony is climbing out of the mountain, fire Pokémon out front, flying in support, poison special attackers. Everyone else, watch for strays. If at all possible, try and protect the fossils. Rangers are inbound, first ETA is 15 minutes. Over. Ryback raises it to his mouth. "This is Ryback. We've got about a dozen Pokémon that were in the path of the twister-growing shrooms. Over." "Natalie here. I've got it, over." Ryback reclips his radio, then turns to the trio. "What have you got?" "Charmander," Red says. "Nidoran and Spinarak are poison, but not special attackers." "We have Pidgey," Blue says, cocking a thumb at Leaf. "They're not enough, but the Charmander might help. You're with me, Red." Red hesitates, then nods and steps forward as he unclips Charmander's ball. Ryback turns to Blue and Leaf. "Can you two hold a perimeter?" Blue and Leaf nod. "Good. This is one of the buildings we've been storing fossils in. Keep any rampaging Pokémon from destroying it if you can, and stop them from coming up behind us." Ryback moves around the building and toward the oncoming swarm of Paras and Parasect. Red's face is pale, but he raises his fist, and Blue bumps it. "Guess it's your turn for thrilling heroics. At least your arm's not broken." Leaf hugs Red. "Be careful. Watch the crosswind. Blue smirks as his friend freezes, then awkwardly pats her shoulder. I will. Keep Blue out of trouble. Why do I always get nanny duty? Leaf grumbles, lips twitching upward. I'm sorry, of the three of us, which has a badge again? Blue asks. Red gives a weak smile and jogs after Ryback. Blue and Leaf watch him go, then summon Zephyr and Crimson as they move back to cover both sidelines. Zephyr, scout. Crimson, scout. Blue watches Zephyr loop around them in the air, slowly scoping the area for any approaching threats. He keeps his gaze on the ground, watching for any telltale signs of Pokémon burrowing under the surface. To his right, Blue can just make out the beginning of the assault in his periphery. Blasts of fire and gusts of wind hit the expanding cloud of spores from multiple directions, keeping it and the insects emitting it, or more accurately, the mushrooms on their backs, from advancing. There's an occasional boom as fire causes a pocket of spores to combust all at once. Blue wipes sweaty palms against his pants. Red and Charmander would be back up to the more experienced trainers with stronger fire Pokémon, picking off any paras that get too close, or helping cleanse the bodies of overrun Pokémon before they begin emitting their own spores. They wouldn't be near the center of the fighting, and should have plenty of time to fall back if they get overrun. He forces himself to go back to scanning the rest of the dig site, where wild Pokémon continue to run around haphazardly. The occasional ace or scientist rushing to join the main fight engages them, whether by their choice or the Pokémon's, and 3 separate battles break out in Blue's field of vision. If one of them need help, and we're just standing here doing nothing, Leaf says behind him. Yeah. Zephyr lets out a warning cry as a group of Zubat flutter by. Blue feels the merciful cool of the battle calm descending as they flutter and loop closer and closer, only to soar away when Zephyr gives a louder battle screech. As they go, his antsy excitement returns, sending useless energy through his arms and legs, commanding him to go, fight, help. A gout of flame to his left makes Blue turn to see a woman with a Flareon cleansing the Pokémon that were caught in the spore cloud. She reaches a Graveler that shudders as soon as the flame finishes washing over it, and a flash of light quickly captures it before she moves on to the next, making her way toward the mountain's edge. Got movement here, Leaf says. Blue unclips Maturin's ball and looks over his shoulder to see a growing bulge moving through the ground as something digs beneath it. Go, Bulbasaur! Her Pokémon flashes into existence just as the Sandshrew reveals itself. Vine Whip. Her Pokémon extends its vines and rears them back, but the Sandshrew dives back underground before they can land. They watch the Sandshrew burrow away, and Leaf reclips her ball without withdrawing Bulbasaur. Do you think... Leaf is interrupted by a heavy rumble beneath them that sends both to their knees. Either someone just used Earthquake, or we need to get off this side of the mountain, she says. More of them might be coming up under us. There might be an Onix digging around to get away from them, but it probably won't head any farther up. Probably? Hopefully. What do you want to do? Sound a full retreat? They might not want to leave their fossils. Leaf bites her lower lip. Ace is in charge of security. Maybe we can get one of them to... This time both Zephyr and Crimson give warning cries as another flock of Zubat race toward them. In the space of a heartbeat, it becomes clear that these are not going to just fly by, and the battle calm is there like a cool cloak round his shoulders. 1, 3, 5, 6, 7. Blue braces his arm. Go, Maturin. Water gun. Bulbasaur, return. Go, Lediba. Supersonic. Water and sound knock a Zubat out of the sky and send 2 more tumbling in different directions, and then their Pidgey engage the rest of them. The Zubat are smaller and more agile, but the birds are ever so slightly faster, keeping ahead of the swarm's poisonous fangs. Blue and Leaf focus on directing Maturin and Lediba and let their Pidgey's instincts take over. Blue feels the split in attention keenly as he keeps trying to pay attention to what Zephyr is doing while finding new targets for Maturin. But a distant part of him observes the wider battle and thinks of ways to end it. Water gun! Water gun! Those 3 are coming back. We won't be able to avoid them all. Supersonic! I know I'm going to withdraw Lediba before they reach her. Should we rise and fall? Blue remembers the tactics they practiced on the roof of Viridian, and plays it out in his head. Too slow. Vanishing act. Need more support. Supersonic. How about a pinwheel? All right, on 3. 2 water gun. 1. Crimson, defend. Crimson breaks away and flies over to hover above her as Blue grabs Maturin off the ground and runs behind them. Part of his skin touches Maturin's and immediately feels dry and stiff as the moisture is sucked out of it. Blue puts Maturin back down and ignores the ache. Ready. Crimson gust. Zephyr, break! Crimson begins flapping hard in the direction of the swarm as Zephyr dips a wing and soars away. The Zubat trying to chase both begin to get buffeted by the wind, struggling to make headway against it. Some begin to break away and approach from above or the sides. Blue points to each in turn with his commands. Maturin, water gun! Zephyr, quick attack! Spurts of water continue to knock Zubat out of the air, and Zephyr is a tan blur as he zips back and forth to harry them from behind. The Zubat try to fly around the column of wind, but Leaf pivots Crimson with them, wheeling the wild Pokémon in a slow arc. One by one, Zubat begin to drop to the ground and fail to rise, or turn to flee. But soon Crimson tires, and Maturin runs out of water. As soon as the wind dies down, the remaining 4 Zubat close the gap in a blink. Maturin return, go Kamuri. Lediba supersonic, Crimson wing at Crimson return. Leaf's beam hits her Pokémon as it screeches in pain, cutting the sound off as it vanishes in a red glow. Blood and feathers finish falling from where it was as the Zubat wheel around in confusion, then go for Lediba. Lediba, return. Kamuri, extrasensory. The Zubat begin to crash into each other, screeching in alarm and pain. One of them uses their own supersonic wail, causing Blue to uselessly clap his hands over his ears. Blue's vision swims as he feels the sound in his sinuses, the pressure waxing and waning in a way that makes his head feel like a squeezed water balloon. Blue drops to all fours and curls up into a ball as the vertigo sets in, flashing back to years of training drills in school. Their instructor stood in front of the class, speaking as they demonstrated the proper response to the audio assault they were all about to endure. The best defense against moves that cause mental confusion is to focus on what your body is doing. Maintain a physical position that's low to the ground and eliminates your body's ability to hurt itself. Sharp pain blooms as Blue's nails scrape at his ears, and he tucks his hands under his knees to pin them with his weight. The abrasion of the soil and pebbles against his skin grounds him as the wail goes on, and oh, blessed silence. No, not silence, but without the audio scalpel of their cry, everything seems so muted. Blue uncurls and pushes himself up, knees wobbling. He expects to see the Zubat all dead or captured, but 2 are still in the air. What felt like a minute under sonic siege was only seconds as the beam of high-pitched sound was either directed elsewhere or died with one of the Zubat on the ground. Leaf throws a pair of Pokeballs that capture them, and Blue aims his at the ones still in the air. His nerves are rattled, but the battle calm is still there, and he draws it tighter around himself to block out the stinging pain of his self-inflicted ear cuts. He tracks the Zubat as they flutter in panicked circles and loops under Kamuri's mental onslaught, 1 ball on each, letting his thoughts drift so that his arms move purely on reflex, tracking the 2 Pokémon. Ping. He throws one, sucking it out of the air. The second ball pings another lock, and he throws again just as the Zubat stops flapping its wings. Its frail body plummets and bounces against the ground once before lying still. Blue quickly unhooks another ball and captures it before letting his breath out in a rush. He turns to Kamuri, whose eyes are just beginning to return to normal as his posture slowly relaxes. Good job, Kamuri. Guard. He takes out a Poke Puff and tosses it to his Pokémon, then brings Maturin back out and lets her empty his spare water bottle before giving her a Poke Puff too. You okay? Leaf asks. Your left ear is bleeding. Blue checks and winces as the cut behind his ear stings at his touch. Fine. How's Crimson? He takes out a potion and sprays his ear. I'm going to wait for a Pokémon Center to take him back out. She begins to pick up her new Zubat and check them with her Pokédex, face growing longer after each. Both gone. Yours? Leaf's voice is flat, and Blue gives her a searching look. He's about to ask if she's okay, but holds his tongue. Maybe she's wearing her own cloak. Blue checks the 2 Zubat he caught. One's okay. He releases the dead one, then goes to get the Pokeball that missed. Around them, the war for the mountainside continues unabated. A few dozen figures hold the line against the Paras and Parasect in the distance, while random wild Pokemon are fought and taken down by the rest of the trainers, spread out around the dig site. Zephyr comes down to land on Blue's shoulder, and his talons bite into the undermesh of his shirt. Blue stifles a cry and resists the urge to chase his Pokemon off. Zephyr is quivering with exhaustion, and Blue strokes him instead. "Forgot about the great job you did up there, boy," he mutters as he picks up the Pokeball and tucks it away, then gives his Pidgey some berries and a poke puff. "You'll be a new terror in the sky when you're all grown up." After one last look at the main battlefield, Blue returns to Leaf and Kamuri. "Zephyr's tired. Think we'll..." Click, 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 click. Blue and Leaf blink. What was thud, 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 thudder? Blue and Leaf look around wildly for the source of the noise, then look at each other. The other side, move. Crash. A Graveler bursts through the building in a hail of broken wood and glass as Leaf and Blue throw themselves away from the rolling boulder. Zephyr launches back into the air with a shriek of protest, and Blue's other 2 Pokemon flinch at the hail of shrapnel. "Kamuri! Leaf Blade!" Blue yells as he scrambles to his feet. "Zephyr, back!" Zephyr aborts his dive midway, while Kamuri leaps at the Graveler and slashes it across the face. The Graveler roars in pain and tries to body slam Kamuri, who leaps backward. Blue is about to command Maturin when another loud click-click is heard. Blue resists the urge to turn around and look for the source of the sound. He knows better than to take his eyes off a Pokemon in a battle. A moment later, he's glad he does, because he sees the Graveler freeze, then throw itself onto its face, grabbing the earth with all 4 hands. Blue's battle calm crystallizes into one last insight, then shatters in a flood of icy panic. "Self-destruct!" he yells as his hands fly to his Pokeballs to withdraw everyone. "Return, Maturin! Return, Kamuri!" Blue's every heartbeat is like a timer counting down, and rather than risk wasting any more seconds trying to return Zephyr, he simply starts running and yells, "Zephyr, back!" Leaf has already taken off for the opposite side of the ruined building and skids to a stop before diving behind it. Blue wants to yell for her to keep running, but it may be their only chance. Not gonna make it, he thinks with another spurt of panic, and runs faster. Shit, shit, shit. Blue hears Leaf yell, "Hey, get down!" and wonders if she's talking to him before he reaches the end of the building and sees a paleontologist with a heavy rucksack standing there with a nonplussed look on his face. A distant part of Blue recognizes him as the one that was giving Red and him the evil eye earlier. And then a giant, hot hand presses its palm against his back and shoves just as a massive boom leaves his ears ringing for the second time in 5 minutes. Blue lies in a crumpled heap until the world stops spinning, and he can finish testing for broken bones. His elbow feels like it shattered when he rolled into a rock, but he can move it. And he smacked his head against the ground pretty bad, but he doesn't feel nauseous or disoriented. I should be dead. What was that? 200 feet at most? He realizes he can vaguely hear something through the ringing that might be Leaf calling his name, and shifts around until he can see her relieved face looking down at him. "Leaf," he mutters. "Feel right?" She sticks a thumb up, then starts spraying potion liberally over his head and neck and shoulders. He points a finger to his elbow, where the outer part of his shirt was shredded to reveal the mesh under it. He's glad it was there to save him from losing skin, but he almost changes his mind at the pain of Leaf rolling his sleeve down to see the damage. His elbow looks badly bruised, but doesn't seem to be broken. The bone might be cracked, but at the first spray of potion he feels the pain lessen, and after a few more the swelling goes down enough for him to flex his arm with minimal pain. Zephyr lands next to him, and a wave of relief makes him dizzy. Or maybe that's the start of a concussion. He pats his Pidgey with his good arm, then returns him to his ball and stands up with Leaf's help. A couple uncomfortable squirts in his ears has him shaking his head and trying to get the liquid out, but the ringing has stopped enough for him to hear. "We should be dead," is the first thing he hears. I know, I was thinking the same thing. That Graveler must have been freshly evolved if its blast was so small. Blue looks at the blackened remains of the Graveler's body, and the scorch marks on the ground around it. He considers going over to see if it's still savable. Sometimes with immediate medical attention, a self-destructing Pokémon can be saved, but he knows the window of opportunity would have passed while he was recovering. Blue's surprised Leaf didn't try to save it, but he's glad she was worried about making sure he was all right. "Hey, where's that other guy?" "He's inside." She jerks a thumb at the long, narrow building, which has a huge section torn out of the side. "Said he's going to check on the fossils." Blue's frowning at the visible destruction. "Something wrong?" "Sorry, yeah, just..." "Was he standing there when you got here?" Leaf stares at him, then blinks as it registers. "Yeah, I wonder why he didn't yell a warning about the Graveler. Didn't even have a Pokémon out, right?" "No." "Blue, those clicks." He remembers. Right before they heard the Graveler start running for its rollout. Then again before the self-destruct. "You don't think..." He sees his mounting unease reflected in her gaze, and they begin moving toward the building together. "There must be a reasonable explanation," Leaf says, and Blue notices that she's whispering now. Blue unclips a ball, heart pounding. What they're thinking is crazy, but better safe than sorry. "Go, Maturin." He picks his Pokémon up after she appears and steps up into the broken remains of the building. Leaf follows him, hands moving over her right ear. The inside of the building is a mess of wood and glass and paper. They step over a crushed table and around a cabinet torn partway off the wall to walk toward the opposite end of the rectangular building. What looks like a storage room is open, and the paleontologist is standing in front of a series of labeled drawers with the rucksack he was wearing at his feet. The one near the middle is open, with rows of gray container balls nestled in slots documenting where and when they were found. Most of the slots are empty. The bag looks to be about halfway full. The paleontologist turns to them as they approach, 2 more containers in his hand. He bends and places them in the bag, then securely closes it. "What are you doing?" Blue asks, throat dry. "Moving these. It's not safe here anymore, so I've been going around to get these off-site." "You said you were just going to check on them," Leaf says, stepping up beside Blue. "Change of plans. Just got the orders." His hands never stop moving, and when he finishes tying the bag, he slings it over his shoulder. Blue can't help but stare at the still open cabinet, with half of its containers still sitting it. Something's wrong. Something's wrong. "Stop," Leaf says, and Blue's attention snaps to the man's hand as he unclips a ball from his waist and braces his arm, paying her no mind. "Go, Abra." The squat tan psychic Pokémon appears on the floor, sitting quietly with its eyes closed, and Blue is suddenly very afraid and very glad that he's dark. "Stop. Whatever you're doing, we need to make sure." "Abra, teleport," the man says as he reaches forward to put a hand on his Pokémon, and with a surge of adrenaline, Blue yells, "Maturin, water gun!" His Pokémon, who might normally hesitate to shoot in the direction of a human, focuses on the Abra and spits a sharp stream of water out. The trainer flinches for just a moment, and in that moment there's a pop as the Abra vanishes, the trainer's hand an inch away. The water hits the floor and digs a shallow groove in it, and the 3 are left staring at each other for the space of a heartbeat. I just ordered my Pokémon to attack his outside of a challenge. He was standing right there. He might have been hit. I could be charged as a renegade. "Go, Sandslash," the man says, and suddenly there's a squat, spiny Pokémon standing between them. Blue stares at it, still trying to process what's happening. Battle calm, where's my battle calm when the paleontologist says, "Slash," voice tight and angry, face a mask. "Slash." Not scratch, the generic command for a claw attack, generally safe for trainer battles. Slash, the command that specifies lethal intent for Pokémon specifically trained to recognize and aim for vital organs in their opponent. And the Sandslash moves toward them. Blue scrambles back, dropping Maturin and opening his mouth to yell a command to her, while Leaf presses something to her left ear and turns around, right hand pointing a Pokéball and activating it manually, arm snapping up. He has a moment to wonder why she's summoning it behind her, then yells, "Withdraw," as the Sandslash claws Maturin across the chest, too quick for her to react. Then Leaf says, "Sing," and Blue snaps his hands up to cover his ears, even knowing he's too low. Fire and fungi. Birds and bugs. Poison and paras. Simple equations with obvious outcomes. if the variables are anywhere near even. A single Arcanine could scorch dozens of paras to ash. A single Pidgeot could tear a field of them to pieces with a miniature cyclone. A single Muck could bury waves of them in poison. But no Pokemon is immune to fatigue, and all the type advantage in the world won't stop sheer, overwhelming numbers. Ember, Ember, Ember. The fire flicks out, 1, 2, 3, and a trio of paras crackle and burn. Behind them, another 6 advance, shooting out yellow and green and blue spores that get swept back by the wings of Ryback's Fearow. It dives a second later, piercing and shredding the dome of a Parasect, before flying up in a corkscrew to shed the mushroom and insect gore covering its feathers. Red can't think of how long they've been fighting anymore, or how much longer until the Rangers come. His entire world is the next attack, and then the next, and the next. The radio keeps squawking orders and warnings and calls for help, but Red barely pays attention to it anymore. He feels like he's in a cartoon, trying to plug a wall that keeps sprouting new leaks. Red's Nidoran is already exhausted, and his poisonous spurs take out another handful of the paras before he accumulates too many injuries for Red to heal with quick sprays of potion. Spinarak takes his place and holds up better until a Parasect rushes forward and claws off 2 of its forelegs. Red withdraws it before the giant claws can close around its head, and an Ember by Charmander swiftly engulfs the Parasect. Its flaming corpse does little to deter the red and orange swarm, the red and orange swarm that extends for 200 meters in front of them. Could use a Beedrill about now, wouldn't you say? Shut up, past Red. Leaf's Beedrill might help take out another dozen or 2. But the real battle will be decided by their special attackers. No matter how good a physical fighter is one-on-one, certain special attacks can take out whole swathes of the foe again and again from a safe distance. Between choosing his targets, Red catches glimpses of them at work. A Weezing floats above the swarm to his left, blanketing the bugs below in clouds of noxious gas. To the right, a Magmar glows red-hot and wades through the paras in a shimmering cloud of superheated air that crisps anything near it. Red and Ryback are holding the line between the two, along with a geologist named Pyrrha. Her only super-effective Pokemon is a Numel who spits small showers of embers out of its hump every few seconds to help cover them. Red feels a burst of relief every time the fiery rain comes down to buy him and Charmander some more breathing room. Red doesn't see the Weezing go down or get withdrawn, but he begins to notice the surge in enemies a few seconds before Ryback calls out, "Big group coming on the left!" Red and Pyrrha pivot and redirect their Pokemon to get ready for the 20 or so paras and 3 Parasect that trundle toward them. Too many. Way too many. He shoves down his anxiety and tries to think of solutions. He already tried using his Pokédex to imitate Paris's predators, but the fungi are driving them beyond reasonable fears, which is why they march to their fiery, poisonous doom by the dozens. We need a force amplifier. "I'm going to concentrate on the Parasect," Ryback says. "We need something drill Peck. We need something else to help hold the paras off." Pyrrha hesitates. "I've got a Lickitung, but I'd rather not use him for fodder unless we don't have another choice." Damn it. Guess it's time. "I've got a Spearow, but it's freshly caught. Ember, I don't know how much it will help." "We need whatever we can get." He unclips its ball. "Go, Spearow." The bird appears and screeches at the sight of all the swiftly approaching paras, though whether in fear or hunger, Red doesn't know. Peck. Spearow dives at the paras along the side of the horde, sharp beak dismembering pincers and legs before it flutters back out of their reach. Red sees Ryback's Fearow dive bomb 2 of the Parasect and makes short work of them, but the third holds it off for a bit with a cloud of stun spores that it has to circle around to blow away. Charmander and the Numel burn another handful of paras in the next few seconds, but the rest just keep coming. "Slow retreat," Ryback says. "Keep falling back until this bunch is done." Red begins stepping backward and calls Charmander to follow him as he tries to keep an eye on his Spearow at the same time. The bird is having trouble scoring any killing blows now that the paras know it's around, and Red sees it get engulfed in a cloud of poison powder while it's distracted. "Spearow, quick attack!" Red begins counting in his head. The paras' poison would kill a Pokemon like Spearow after about 60 seconds. He wants to withdraw it, but almost 20 paras are still coming, and the Fearow has only just managed to take down the last Parasect. 4, 5, 6. Back farther, Ryback says, and Red mirrors his backward movements. Charmander, back. The fire lizard is breathing hard, and Red can see the flame on his tail burning low. 11, 12. He won't last much longer. 13, force amplifier, something to make a bigger flame. 15, 16. Another burst of fire from Pyrrha's Numel brings down a second handful, but the paras keep coming, and now they're starting to spread to the sides, outside of their reach. We're breaking formation, Ryback says. 21, 22, 23. We need to hold them here. He quickly commands his Fearow to pick off the bugs that are trying to get past them, leaving Charmander, Spearow, and Numel with the rest. 32, 33, 34. Shit, Red says as another cloud of spores is ejected toward them and jumps to the side. Ember. He lost count and starts again at 40 just in case. We have nothing to burn, nothing to use to spread fire. In his distraction, he sees that Spearow has abandoned the hit and run maneuvers to try and peck the paras again, and feels a surge of fear. Spearow! Quick at! He sees it happen, a burst of blue spores that engulfs the bird's head. No! Red yells, ball extended. Spearow, return! The beam misses as his Pokemon falls into the swarm of paras, who quickly converge on the bird. No, no. Ember, Charmander, Ember, Ember. The globs of fire bring down another 2 paras, but there are a dozen left, and Red watches in horror as blood and feathers spray into the air. Red reclips Sparrow's ball, chest burning as he fights back the urge to run forward and rescue his Pokemon. It's not fair. He was just going to withdraw him. They're still coming, Ryback says as the paras get within 10 feet. If you've got anything else, we need them now. Go, Orval, Pyrrha says, and her Lickitung appears. Supersonic. The Parasect at the front become confused by the beam of shrill noise, allowing Ryback's Fearow to swoop down and rake them to pieces in a series of rapid dives. Focus on defensive fighting, we just need to buy time. Go, Rattata, Red says, biting back bitter words. If you brought your Lickitung out earlier, my Pokemon might still be alive. Quick attack! The paras keep driving themselves forward over the bodies of their fallen kindred, driven by the mushroom's imperative to spread their spores. With the 5 Pokemon combined, however, they die as quickly as they scuttle forward, bursts of flame and wind providing cover for Red's Rattata to distract the confused front lines. Red goes from tired to exhausted, but still the battle goes on until his voice grows hoarse and his fingers fumble with potion bottles. Ranger ETA is 5 minutes, the radio says. Hold the line as best you can. Shit, Red croaks. It's only been 10 minutes? I know, Ryback pants. Drill peck, feels like hours. Should I call my friends? Not yet. They have their own job to do. Red opens his mouth to argue, then closes it. There's no time, and Ryback is the senior trainer around. Pyrrha, my Rattata needs a potion. Okay, do it. Orval, slam. The Lickitung waddles forward and smashes its tail down on one of the paras. Defense curl. Rattata back. Red kneels down as his Pokemon returns to him, trembling with adrenaline and pain. Red's chest hurts as he sprays her wounds. You're doing great, Red whispers as he strokes her head. She nuzzles Red's fingers with her whiskers, causing his throat to tighten. Just keep moving, girl. It'll be over soon. He wants to give her more time to rest, doesn't want to send her back at all, but the Lickitung is already being overwhelmed. Go, quick attack! Red gets to his feet and hangs the potion bottle on his belt before realizing it's empty and tossing it aside. His eyes roam the swarm of paras as he digs a new one out of his bag, new fear settling into him as he sees the scuttling mass of insects seems untouched, despite what must be hundreds of charred and broken bodies they trample underfoot. We're not going to be able to hold out another 5 minutes, Pyrrha says, echoing Red's thoughts. Orval, supersonic. Even if we do, there's no guarantee the Rangers will get to our area in time. We can't spare anyone to go for help, Ryback says. If we have to run, we run, but not while our Pokemon can still fight. Shara, drill peck. Red tries to think of his remaining resources. He can use a smokescreen from Charmander, but it won't hamper the paras. who are used to traveling in the pitch black of the mountain. His Pichu's electricity would barely hurt them, and his Caterpie could maybe trip up one of them. And that's it. If there's something else he could be doing, he's too distracted to think of it. If the Rangers don't arrive soon, we're screwed. Charmander, Ember, Rattata, quick attack. The minutes drag on. Charmander's embers becoming smaller and smaller, Rattata moving slower with every strike. Soon, a Paras survives an ember, and Red notices that Charmander's tail flame is a slender flicker. I have to withdraw my Charmander, Red says, coughing at the dryness in his throat. He's spent. Do you have any ether? Pyrrha asks. No. Here. She hands him a bottle and Red drops to his knees, spraying the rare stimulant into Charmander's mouth. A few seconds later, the lizard's eyes widen and his tail flame flares back to near full size. He hands it back. Thanks. Should buy us another few minutes. She waits for her Numel to send another salvo of fiery death into the Paras' ranks before she gives it some. Charmander, Ember, Ryback, even with the ether, our Pokemon are fading fast. I'm going to call my friends. Ryback looks torn. All right, let them nut. Rangers on site, approaching east side. Everyone begin rotating to help those on the west. Never mind, Ryback says with a grin. We're on the home stretch, just a little longer. Red still feels like they can use the help, but he has to admit that knowing the cavalry's on the way is invigorating. A few seconds later, he can see the effect of the new arrivals as more trainers begin to hem in the Paras at their sides. Soon they can begin advancing, and do so, pushing the waves of Paras forward. A Rapidash and Venomoth spew flamethrowers and sludge bombs to their left, while on their right a Quilava sends out exploding bursts of fire into the swarm, and a Dodrio dashes back and forth along the front lines, each head skewering a different bug every second. Red's fear and anxiety slowly fades as they push forward and reclaim lost ground, though the smell and feel of all the dead Paras that crunch underfoot is nauseating. Red tries to avoid them at first, but there's just too many, and he still has to stay focused on the fight, and instead only watches for patches of poison to step around or fungus to burn. Between Ryback's Fearow taking out any Parasect that trundled too close, and Charmander and the Numel's flames crisping the front lines, Red's Rattata is free to strike in quick attacks that get it out of the enemy's reach before they can retaliate. Red watches his Pokemon harry and harass the swarm with pride until one of the bodies they pass by rears up and stabs her through the torso with both claws. Red whips her ball up and tries to get a lock on his Rattata as she thrashes weakly against her assailant. He watches with his heart in his throat as her movements slow, and the dying Paras finally crawls off her. Rattata, return, Red cries out, withdrawing her into her ball. Charmander, Ember. Please, it was only a few seconds, please be okay, Red thinks as he scrambles for his Pokédex for a moment, then stops and reclips her ball to his belt. He forces himself to focus on the battle. It won't change if I know now or 5 minutes from now. Focus. Worry fills Red's stomach with acid, but he'll be damned if he lets his distraction cost him another Pokemon. The circle of trainers around the swarm grows tighter, and they advance farther toward the collapsed dig site. Paras and Parasect are still pouring out of it, until the whole battlefield is stunned by an echoing roar. A Charizard dips out of the sky, its scales gleaming in the sun like living flames. Its wings beat the air in claps of thunder before it soars down over the epicenter and bathes it in fire. Again and again, the trainer on its back strafes the battlefield, pouring hot death into the hole the Paras are crawling out of until the fungus in the tunnel catches fire. Soon after, a pillar of black smoke begins to rise, and the waves of bugs crawling out of the hole abruptly stops. Red watches in awe, and Charmander makes a low crooning noise as it tracks the Charizard's flight with wide eyes. The battle is quickly over after that, and Red finds a relatively clean boulder to sit on, as the dozens of site workers and nearby trainers who came to help coordinate cleanup and triage. Ryback finds him there, staring down at Rattata's ball, Pokédex sitting on the rock beside him. Did it make it? Red shakes his head, not looking up. The first Pokemon he ever caught, dead because a stupid bug was driven into a suicidal frenzy by a fungal parasite. I'm sorry. I wanted to say, you did good. We couldn't have done it without you and your Pokemon. Thanks, Red whispers, and clears his throat. He wants to take his mask off, but the stench would be even worse then. Want to head back to your friends? Make sure they're all right? Or do you need a minute? Red shakes his head again and hops off the boulder as he pockets his dex and reclips Rattata's ball. He'll release and bury her later. He wishes he could do the same for his Spearow, but he doesn't have the stomach to search for his remains, if there even are any. As they walk, Red lets memories take him, training with his Rattata, scouring Viridian for wild Pokemon with her, finding his Spinarak and catching it, playing with her and Charmander in the park at Pewter. Why had he never named her? Even now, Red can't think of one. It doesn't feel right, that she'll forever just be Rattata to him. He thinks of the nest she was part of when he caught her, how she might have had children. Was it worth catching her, bringing her north all this way, only to die on a mountain far from her home? Red looks around at the blighted mountainside and spots a pair of trainers sitting beside a third who's lying still, eyes closed. Red takes his hat off and runs his fingers through his sweaty hair, enjoying the breeze and happy to be alive. The first thing Leaf does after Wigglytuff starts singing is take out a potion and spray Maturin's chest, where the Sandslash's claws scored deep wounds. Then she takes another pair of plugs out and stuffs them in Blue's ears. Her heart races as she waits for him to wake up, gaze never leaving the Sandslash or its master, the thief. No, not just a thief. He attacked them. He actually sent his Pokemon to attack them. Renegade. The thought chills her to her bone. Encountering renegades, that's the stuff trainers do in comics and movies. Is he insane? He must be, to doom himself over some fossils, no matter how valuable. Of course, Blue's Squirtle did attack his Abra first, but that was clearly a warning shot, wasn't it? Oh gods, did they attack an innocent trainer unprovoked? Are they going to get branded? But no, he used a Graveler to tear up the building, maybe even knew they were on the other side. He summoned a Sandslash to attack them. He was prepared, could have had it tear up the rest of the house, passed the whole thing off as natural. Leaf walks over to her Wigglytuff and strokes its lush fur to calm herself a little. The feel of it is truly incredible, like trailing her fingers through a warm cloud, and her nerves are soothed almost immediately. Or maybe it's the song, warped and heavily muted, but still audible at this range, and lovely. She doesn't know how loud it has to be to knock her out, but she's glad she tested whether the plugs would work up close. Blue stirs in her peripheral, and she moves back over to him just as he jerks awake, eyes wide. It takes a moment for his face to clear, and when it does, his expression hardens. He gets to his feet and checks Maturin, then flashes her a thumbs up and withdraws his Pokemon. He takes his phone out and begins typing into it, and it takes Leaf a moment to realize that he's marking their location with a renegade flag. It might not even be noticed right away, with the Tier 1 still ongoing, but Leaf's eyes widen. She forgot about that. How far is Wigglytuff's song going? It's probably not nearly as far since they're most of the way inside a building, but it still could be endangering people. She has to end it. Leaf goes over to the renegade and carefully undoes his belt, then empties his pockets. She carries all his things over to the cabinet and puts them on it, then returns his Sandslash to its ball. What else can she do to secure him? Once caught, Pokemon are intrinsically taught not to attack people through the very first, most basic training programs, so she can't order her Bulbasaur to wrap him in vines or put him to sleep. She can have him emit some sleep powder and then just sprinkle some into the man's nose, but they're much less predictable than the continued effect of Wigglytuff's singing, unless she's willing to just keep scooping more over him, which might be dangerous. Leaf nearly leaps out of her skin when Blue taps her shoulder and he puts his palms up in apology. She waves it off, cheeks flushed, as she takes a deep breath. Blue shows her his phone, which has the message, "What are you doing?" typed on its notepad app. She brings up her own. Gotta stop the song, others at risk. Wanna secure him first. Blue scratches his neck, then types, "Any of these doors got locks?" They check, and only the outhouse-style bathroom does. "Flimsy," Blue types with a frown. "Maybe stick them both in there and close the door. Limit sound exposure outside." Blue nods, and they work together to drag and shove the renegade's body into the bathroom. Leaf can see it would be a tight fit to get Wigglytuff into it too. But thankfully, the Pokemon's body is extremely malleable, and she fits comfortably in the remaining space. She continues to cheerfully sing as Leaf strokes her head, then closes the door. The sound drops to nearly nothing. "I'll test," Blue says, and unplugs an ear before she can stop him. His eyes promptly roll up in his head, and she catches him before he can crumple to the ground. Leaf sighs and lowers him the rest of the way, then finds the plug he dropped and puts it back in. When he wakes up, she leads him all the way outside, where he tries again with some trepidation. He soon relaxes and flashes a thumbs up. Leaf unplugs too, first one ear, then the next. She can still hear the song, but about as muted as it was while she was standing next to it with the plugs. "Okay, do a quick search to make sure no one around us got knocked out while in a fight. I'll stay and make sure she keeps singing." "Got it." Leaf leans against an undamaged part of the building and looks out over the mountainside. Her pulse is finally returning to something approaching normal, but she still feels jittery. Until someone else shows up and the renegade is physically confined, it feels like anything can happen. And since things are currently stable, anything would likely be bad. She keeps replugging her ears and poking her head into the building to make sure the bathroom door is closed. After the third time, she checks she goes inside and brings all his stuff out with her. When she unplugs her ears, she hears a roar and turns to see a Charizard flying over the battlefield. It's awe-inspiring enough to make her forget what's going on for a moment, but by the time it finishes its fiery strafing runs, she realizes that Blue's still not around. She texts him and waits, nerves ratcheting back up again. She goes through the building to the other side to check if he's in that direction when her phone buzzes, and she sees that he's on his way back, with help. Relief makes her legs buckle, and she sits down for a minute before reminding herself that this would be the exact time in a movie for the villain to escape, and maybe kill his jailer on the way. She puts her earplugs back in and stays in the building until Blue arrives with 2 ace trainers and one of the paleontologists, who wait outside. "They know what's up," Blue says through text. "Return her, and they'll hold him until a ranger arrives." "They have rope?" "Better." Leaf is curious, but she complies and waits outside while they carry the man out. It becomes clear once an ace brings out a Barriered, or Mr. Mime, as it's called in Unova. The rare psychic Pokemon creates a telekinetic barrier around the man, trapping him once he wakes. As she's asked to corroborate Blue's story, Red and Ryback arrive, and they hear the whole thing. Leaf feels herself getting anxious again, as Blue recounts the part where he fired on the Abra first. Who are they going to believe, 2 kids or one of their co-workers? Ryback and the other paleontologist look stunned. "I just can't believe Yuta would do something like that. He's been working with us for over a year." Red looks tired, maybe worse than tired, but his voice is steady when he says, "That's what makes renegades so scary, isn't it? They don't walk around with a big red R on their shirt. Anyone could be one." "Not making a great case for us," Blue growls, elbowing him. "Yuta wasn't the most friendly sort," Ryback admits. "He was always helpful, but never got close to anyone." "Careful," Red says. "It's been shown in studies that it's easier to remember negative things about someone and forget positives when primed to think badly of them." "Whose side are you on?" Blue demands. Red opens his mouth, then closes it and rubs his eyes. "Sorry, I was just—" "It's okay," Ace Trainer Nora says. "We're pretty sure the grandchildren of Professor Oak and Juniper didn't suddenly decide to become renegades a few weeks into their journeys. Just in case, though, you're both prepared to make a deposition to the Rangers?" asks Jabari, the other ace. Leaf gets the impression the question is rhetorical. They both nod. "I know this is just our word against his, but we can at least prove that he tried to steal the fossils," Leaf says. "If you can find anywhere an Abra teleported into without its trainer, that'll corroborate that part," Red suggests. "And just test his Pokemon," Blue says, "if he has any that have been trained to attack people." "Yes, I'm sure the Rangers have seen all the same crime shows," Nora says with a smile. "What was his job here?" Leaf asks. "He was a geologist," Ryback says. He... What is it?" "Let me guess," Red says. He ran the equipment that monitored seismic activity. Ryback nods with a sigh. I thought it was strange that we didn't get any warnings about Pokemon tunneling under us. I suppose he was ready for something like this. Or worse, what if he planned for it? Leaf tries to dismiss the thought. Who could plan for a rampage? They would have to set it off themselves, or work with others to do so. The thought is insane. But she keeps thinking of the man's face, his calm, his preparation. Well, everyone get comfortable while we wait for the Rangers, Paul says, as he leans against the building with his arms crossed. Personally, I'm hoping Mr. Mori wakes up before they get here. I'd like to ask him a few questions myself. As always, we must ask ourselves what the point of our criminal justice system is and what we wish to optimize it for. Safety, reform, punishment. These three values can often result in very different outcomes, which is why the case of how the state treats renegades so often inflames public policy debates. It is taken for granted that, while many crimes are heinous beyond words, for this crime, and this crime only, it is justified that we brand a man or woman irredeemable, and with all of society's collective might, from gym leaders to police to rangers, we hound them to their dying breath, as we would a rogue Pokemon. Indeed, it is often argued that once committed to such acts, the renegade ceases to be human, and thus is no longer treated as such. In a world where our very survival as a species depends on us capturing and training Pokemon not to hurt humans, but to defend them, we hold the act of training them to kill us so profane that anyone who would violate that cornerstone of human society is utterly ejected from it. So hated is the renegade, so feared by their region, so dangerous in the common mind, that we have accepted the thought of using their own crimes against them. We empower hunters to mimic their methodology, to commit their same profanity in order to keep us safe. And perhaps that's as it should be. By every account, renegades are a vicious breed, driven to unconscionable extremes that set them apart from society's core values, often simply to enrich themselves. Or in perhaps the most sympathetic of examples, driven so mad with grief or rage that they throw their lives away to get revenge for a loved one murdered by more mundane means. In any situation, they are regarded as people who are beyond reason. But consider this. In the time of conflict, there was once a wealthy province where petty crime ran rampant. There was a great divide between the rich and poor, and many hungry and homeless citizens would choose to steal a loaf of bread rather than starve. The shogun decreed that a policy of leniency had bred thieves and changed the punishment for thievery from imprisonment to death. The crime of thievery did indeed go down by some measure, but the crimes of assault and murder rose to far outstrip what was lost. For many thieves that spied a witness or faced a lawman, it was often a simple choice to fight to their last breath, to kill, when they knew the only other outcome was to be killed themselves. Excerpt from the blog Rationally Thinking by Giovanni Sakaki, Sept. 4th, 1505.